When it comes to the identity of the Legend of Zelda series, each game has truly evolved it in their own way, yet still retained an air of familiarity across the series. That is until Breath of the Wild, a game that challenged the conventions of Zelda so much so that it took a grand new identity on its own. And while it did retain elements from the past, it was truly a breath of fresh air. However, as grand as the scope of the original Breath of the Wild was, the sequel, Breath of the Wild 2, aims to be even grander. However, as much as we believe we know about the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the identity of the game is still truly unknown, with the potential of the name being up in the air. But with this Zelda Theory, we're gonna go ahead and tackle that potential and that identity for Breath of the Wild 2, in which we look to the connections of the past in order to understand the future and learn the hidden history of Ganondorf and, in extension, the Triforce, and that Link must now take the Passage of Heroes. Hey everyone, it's HMK once again, and it is time to shatter the truth of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. So if you're ready for that, be sure to strap on in and let's dive directly into the noise. While some of the biggest things going into Breath of the Wild 2 that we see as a difference from the original Breath of the Wild is the inclusion of the beautiful sky islands that we'll be traveling to, Link's mysterious green new arm that harkens from something of the past, as well as the unknown fate of Zelda. However, the biggest thing that I feel that a lot of people are sleeping on is finally the grand return of Ganondorf, the most iconic Zelda villain that we have not seen in the flesh since Twilight Princess. His return is paramount to understanding the identity of Breath of the Wild 2, as well as the concept of awakening, as he is truly awakening here in Breath of the Wild 2's trailers. But as the King of Evil awakens, this concept is shared between the other two components that are shared between the Triforce, Link and Zelda, and their own awakenings in the original Breath of the Wild. While Link and Zelda's identity in the original Breath of the Wild are indeed familiar, they are still far cries from what their past selves have been established for throughout The Legend of Zelda. With Link being an established decorated knight, captain of the Royal Guard, he even has a pedigree and maintains the training every day, being cultivated and grown into his duty and destiny from an early age that has stuck with him within his developmental years. A rare link in the chain that has had expectations on him since near the beginning. And with Zelda, a budding and curious researcher and scientist by nature, struggles with her duty as Crown Princess of Hyrule, while constantly going through the waves of her own coming-of-age story. And throughout Breath of the Wild, we see that they both surely but slowly come to terms with what they've been known for in past lives and in past games, truly unlocking and awakening to their potential. And this awakening, connections to past selves, is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the identity of Breath of the Wild 2. As Link and Zelda both have experienced an awakening, these awakenings may have awakened Ganondorf. As throughout Zelda's history, the understanding of Ganondorf and the Master Sword's truth have been applied as mere shells in Breath of the Wild 1. While the Master Sword is capable of sealing away the calamity, as we've seen in the Tapestry of Legend, at its core concept and story of Breath of the Wild 1, it is not necessary to use the Master Sword in order to defeat the Calamity Ganon, as well as his other blights, although the Holy Light would help you in the long run. Even so, it is possible to defeat Calamity Ganon and beat Breath of the Wild 1 while missing components deemed necessary in the defeat of this calamity, which includes the Master Sword and the Divine Beasts. This is because, as powerful as Calamity Ganon is, it was not complete. It was not whole. It was a mere fraction, a shell of its true self, Ganondorf. The concept I'm trying to put into play is that while the Master Sword is indeed necessary to defeat Ganondorf, as we've seen time and time again, it was not necessary to defeat Calamity Ganon, as it was not complete. It was not, nor was it ever truly the real threat. And this idea relays over to Link and Zelda in Breath of the Wild 1. They were shells, fractions of their true self that were truly awakened by the end of the game. And this is a concept that I feel is overlooked in Breath of the Wild. The concept of truly awakening to your identity, while at the same time visiting new avenues in order to retain a breath of fresh air. But even with these awakenings of Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, there is a fourth component of an awakening that we have seen in real time that's going to be incredibly important to Breath of the Wild 2. While it took Link falling and being resurrected to truly awaken as the hero, And it took Zelda to see the sacrifice and to have everything happen around her to truly awaken in her own right. It took the combination of these two and everything around it, as well as the malice splattering on the blade, for the Master Sword to truly awaken. As you would notice, it did not activate against the calamity and the malice at that point in time. But after everything was said and done, a familiar spirit within the sword was able to communicate with she who was the goddess reborn. This awakening, or I should say resurrection, of the Master Sword, combined with the true awakening and resurrection of Link 100 years later, led to the Master Sword truly becoming the Blade of Evil's Bane once again. As in the backstory of Breath of the Wild, Link already had the sword, but in order to reacquire it again, Link's courage and power had to be tested before our eyes. This trial was the truth, the proof to their reawakenings and resurrections. As in certain promotional material, the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild is referred to the Master Sword of Resurrection. And while the Master Sword was resurrected, it could be possible that a hero within a hero was resurrected within those 100 years. But once again, it will be these awakenings combined all into one that would lead to the awakening of Ganondorf that we see in Breath of the Wild 2. And to understand Ganondorf, his power and origin, what is needed to finally put him down, we need not look to some old tapestry. We must live these moments ourselves. As alluded in Breath of the Wild 2, Link must revisit moments in time where a Link has held the Master Sword against Ganondorf, and an extension, Demise. And these key games could include the straight shot of Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess, as these are key moments in a singular straight timeline going into the child timeline from the unified timeline, where Link has wielded the Master Sword in pivotal combat against the same eternal conquering foe. And these key games are even referred to by Zelda's speech in the original Breath of the Wild. Whether being skyward bound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight, the sacred blade is forever bound to the soul of the hero. However, it should be noted that Zelda's speech does go on in various other languages to refer to other Zelda games, and that two other key Zelda games in which Link wielded the Master Sword against Ganondorf, or an extension, Ganon, may be included in this passage of heroes as well, particularly two from separate other timelines, A Link to the Past in the Dawnfall timeline, and The Wind Waker in the Adult timeline. They may be included in a cosmic sense if the memories of the Master Sword are being shared between space and time, as Breath of the Wild does take place at the end of whatever Zelda timeline that it does take place in. As the Master Sword is a construct of the goddess herself, this could be possible to achieve and relay those memories from separate other dimensions and bringing in those pivotal moments while at the same time dodging the idea of a dragon break. The key games of Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess can also give Link a greater understanding of the Triforce piece by piece, power, wisdom, and courage in those specific games. Each game, it can give the hero a better understanding of what the Triforce does and how it can be contained or separated, as this knowledge, and even legend, is lost to time itself by the time of Breath of the Wild. As referred to in various texts, the only thing relating to the Triforce in its smallest degree is the idea of the sealing power that the princesses of Hyrule have wielded against the calamity. Having the Link of Breath of the Wild relive the moments of the Links from Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess by either being in the moment of them clashing against Ganondorf or simply inhabiting their bodies can truly show us the history of the royal family of Hyrule that is also the history of Calamity Ganon, or I should say Calamity Ganondorf. As Ganondorf is reawakened, it is more than likely that he will launch an attack against Hyrule in its weakest state. And possibly, in a race against time, Link would have to learn the secrets and stories of this long-lost, forgotten foe. And at the same time, it could give us very interesting insight and perspective to these other beloved games of Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess. This idea, in its prime, is a concept that can be alluded to the notion of how we are searching for an identity of this game and how the past connects to the future of Zelda, but also the idea of multiple Links outfits being present in the base game of Breath of the Wild through Amiibo, and the idea that not only is Breath of the Wild 2 seemingly reviving lost concepts of Breath of the Wild's DLC for a sequel, but also concepts of Skyward Sword's original intent, Ocarina of Time's references on a grander note, and a collective of Twilight Princess's flavors that were introduced specifically in that game, combining these three titles in which Ganondorf's story share many pivotal points in time, and the fact that these are the titles with an apparent adult Link in play. This would be the passage of heroes that Link must walk. The Legend of Zelda: Passage of Heroes.